In 2013, a French Egyptologist named Pierre Tallet was clearing sand out of a small Red Sea cave system at a site called Wadi al-Jarf, on the western coast of the Sinai Peninsula, when he found a wooden chest that had been sealed for the better part of 4,500 years. Inside the chest were several hundred fragmentary sheets of papyrus, written in 2 different black inks, in a tidy administrative hand in the language of the Old Kingdom. The papyri were the working logbook of a single team of Egyptian sailors and laborers, named for their captain, a man called Pierre, who had spent the last year of the reign of the pharaoh Khufu transporting limestone blocks from the quarries of Tura, on the east bank of the Nile, across the river and up the artificial canal system to the building site at Giza. He was building the Great Pyramid. The papyri are dated to the 27th year of Khufu's reign, roughly 2560 before the Common Era. They are the only contemporary administrative record of the construction of the largest of the 3 Giza pyramids that has ever been found. They explain, in modest practical detail, how a team of Egyptian sailors moved 1 million tons of limestone across a river and up a slope without modern machinery. They explain it so clearly that the question of how the pyramids were built is now substantially answered. This is what they say. The first thing the mere papyri show, with great clarity, is that there were no slaves involved. The men who worked on the pyramid received rations. The rations are itemized, day by day, in the logbook. There were daily allotments of bread, beer, dates, onions, fish, lentils, and meat. There were specific bonuses for completing transport runs on schedule. The workers were divided into named teams. Pierre's team, in the surviving papyri, was called the followers of Khufu, or, in some entries, simply the stargazers, and the teams competed against each other for performance bonuses. The labor force at Giza was, by every modern estimate based on the workmen's village excavated by Mark Lehner and Zahi Horace between 1990 and 2010, somewhere between 15 and 20,000 people at the peak of construction. They lived in a planned city south of the Pyramid Plateau, with streets, bakeries, workshops, breweries, an infirmary, and a graveyard. The graveyard has been excavated. The workers who died on the project were buried with personal grave goods, in small mud brick tombs, with inscriptions naming their job: water carrier, stonecutter, foreman, mason, sailor. Many of the bones show healed fractures consistent with construction work, set by skilled physicians and allowed to mend properly. The diet, judged by isotope analysis, was high in animal protein. These are not the bones of slaves. They are the bones of a salaried public works workforce, fed and housed and tended at the expense of the Egyptian state. The outer casing stones, the smooth white facing that originally covered all 3 pyramids, and which is mostly gone now, were quarried at Tura, on the east bank of the Nile, 15 kilometers south of modern Cairo. The mere papyri describe Pierre's team going to Tura, loading limestone blocks onto a flat-bottomed cargo barge, sailing back across the Nile to a port on the west bank, and then transferring the blocks onto smaller barges that were drawn by men along an artificial canal system that ran from the river to the foot of the pyramid plateau. The team made 1 round trip every 10 days. Each barge carried, by the calculation in the papyri, roughly 35 tons of limestone. The internal core blocks, the rougher rubble masonry that makes up the great mass of each pyramid, came from a much closer quarry, immediately south of the building site. The quarry is still visible today, as a long shallow trench in the Giza plateau. It produced limestone in blocks of perhaps 2.5 tons apiece, in such enormous quantities that the surrounding stone has visibly subsided where the rock was removed. The granite, used for the king's chamber, the relieving chambers above it, and the lower portions of the entrance corridor, came from a quarry at Aswan, 800 kilometers up the Nile. Each granite slab weighed between 40 and 70 tons. The papyri do not describe the granite transport directly. Pierre's team handled limestone, but other administrative records of the period confirm that granite blocks were rafted downstream during the annual flood, on huge cargo barges, sometimes accompanied by a dedicated fleet of escort vessels. The most surprising single fact about pyramid construction, which the modern world has only fully grasped in the last 20 years, is that the Nile in 2500 BC ran much closer to the Giza Plateau than it does today. A French and Egyptian geomorphological team, drilling shallow boreholes across the desert between modern Giza and the modern Nile bank in the early 2000s, found pollen and sediment signatures of an old river channel that had once flowed less than a kilometer from the foot of the pyramid plateau. The channel had silted up and been reclaimed by the desert sometime in the late New Kingdom, more than 1,000 years after the pyramids were built. When the pyramids were under construction, the Nile was almost at their feet. The Egyptian engineers built a canal system that brought the river the final 800 meters to the harbor at the base of the plateau. The harbor itself has been partially excavated. It includes mooring stones, stone-lined wharves, and the remains of a wooden gangway. Meare's barge of limestone blocks did not have to be hauled across kilometers of sand. It was unloaded, 10 meters above the river, at a stone wharf at the foot of the pyramid causeway. This single piece of information rearranges the entire problem of pyramid construction. The hardest part, moving the stone over horizontal distance, was solved by floating it. The second hardest part, moving the stone up the side of the pyramid as it grew, has been the subject of an enormous specialist literature. There is no single agreed answer. There are several plausible answers. The likeliest is that the Egyptians used a combination of methods, varying with the height of construction. For the lower courses, up to perhaps a third of the pyramid's height, they almost certainly used a straight external ramp built of mud, brick and rubble, leading up from the quarry on the southern side. Traces of such a ramp have been found in surveys at all three of the Giza pyramids and at the earlier pyramid of Snefru at Meidum. For the middle and upper courses, where a straight ramp would have had to be so long that its volume would have exceeded the volume of the pyramid itself, the favored modern theory is that the Egyptians wound a smaller spiral ramp around the outer faces of the pyramid as it grew, or more elegantly, built a narrow internal ramp inside the pyramid itself, with periodic openings to the outside for the corner-turn maneuvers of the blocks. The internal ramp theory was proposed in the early 2000s by a French architect named Jean-Pierre Houdin. In 2011, a French-Egyptian collaboration called the Scan Pyramids Project began a long program of muon radiography of the Great Pyramid. The technique uses cosmic ray particles to map the density of the interior. The project has, since 2017, confirmed the existence of at least two previously unknown internal voids, one a large gallery above the Grand Gallery, the second a narrow corridor running diagonally upward behind the north face. The narrow diagonal corridor, in particular, is consistent with the inferred path of an internal construction ramp. The horizontal movement of the stone blocks, once they had been unloaded at the harbor, was done by sledge. A wall painting from the tomb of Jehutihotep at Deir el-Bersha, dated to the Middle Kingdom but depicting an older technique, shows a colossal statue being dragged along a wooden sledge by a team of men hauling on ropes. At the front of the sledge, a single worker is shown pouring liquid from a jug onto the sand in front of the runners. The picture had been treated, for 2 centuries, as a ritual act. In 2014, a team of Dutch physicists at the University of Amsterdam tested the friction coefficient of a sledge over dry sand versus the same sledge over sand wetted with a specific water content. Wetting the sand to roughly 2% water content reduced the friction by approximately 50%. The Egyptians, the physicists concluded, had not been performing a ritual. They had been performing a known engineering trick, wetting the sand to lower the friction enough that fewer men could drag the same load. A 2.5-ton stone block, on a properly wetted sand surface, could be moved by a team of perhaps 8 men with ropes. The Great Pyramid contains roughly 2,300,000 blocks. It was built in roughly 20 years. A simple calculation, 20 years, 8 hours of work a day, 300 days a year, gives an average rate of placement of 1 block every 2.5 minutes in continuous operation for 20 years. That rate is consistent with the workforce numbers and the harbor throughput in the Papyri. It is not a mystery. It is an immense construction project, run by an immense state bureaucracy, with the patient labor of well-fed teams of citizens and the patient logistics of a national river that the Egyptians had been administering for 1,000 years before they began to think about building pyramids. The Great Pyramid still stands on the Giza Plateau, with 2 more pyramids beside it, 3 smaller Queen's pyramids, several boat pits, the Sphinx, 2 extensive cemeteries, and the partial excavations of the workman's village. The Sphinx faces east. It looks across the dry channel where the Nile once ran almost to the wharf at the foot of the causeway. It looks at sunrise into the same morning light that Mir the sailor would have looked into on the day he loaded 35 tons of limestone onto a flat-bottomed barge at Tura, 4,500 years ago, and made the half-day crossing back to the West Bank. His logbook now sits in a glass case in the Egyptian Museum. It is dry. It is unspectacular. It is the patient, written, dated, and signed administrative record of how the largest building in the ancient world was built, by salaried men, on a steady river, with wet sand and a sledge. If a long quiet walk along the foot of a great wall held your attention tonight, there are other quiet walks, other rivers that have moved away from the stones they once carried, other administrative records waiting in their cases. We tell one a week, slowly, by the lamp. Subscribe and we will see you at the next one. Sleep well.